I find the examples very helpful to bring it to life for us. So if we think about industry, certain industries have just seized this and run with it, and others are a little bit laggard. So Arup, you can give us maybe an industry perspective as to who's taken it and really taking advantage of it.
So yeah, I work with a large industry. So before I start, I just want to make sure, and I think you covered that, generative AI can do 6 or 7 things. One of them is summarization. It can summarize large text and extract into small text. So let me set the context. The other one, it can generate. You give it small text, it can generate big text. The third thing is it can do, which nobody talks about, is data extraction. It can extract very important data, especially in audit and tax. And that's called named entity extraction. The other thing that's very important to understand, we're talking generative AI. Generative AI, what we are used to at ChatGPT are called large language models, because they take in language and generate language. They're trained on very large corpuses. They cannot be trained, the black box, right? But again, these are the things, before I talk about industry, they can generate, they can summarize, and they can extract. So let's set the context. So let me start off with one industry that nobody wants to talk about, public sector. So I'm working with a lot of public sector clients. I'll talk about financial and healthcare. So in a public sector, everything is like, you write 400 to 500 page documents out there, like FEMA. So nobody reads that after it's generated. So what the public sector is working on, they're ingesting all these 400 page FEMA documents. A friend of mine is doing that into an interface, into a large language model, where you can ask it natural questions, and it'll give you compliance rules, what's going on, without reading the document. Huge advantage, because nobody's going to read a 500-page document. So you will see public sector take large bodies of law, compliance documents, ingest it, and you're going to use a natural language interface, like a chatbot, to ask questions. And that has been very helpful for senators who want to just look at the phone and quickly look at a law. So that's public sector. In healthcare, one of the things that's very, very important, I work with a larger healthcare, especially healthcare is divided into payers and providers, correct? So you're a provider, you're a doctor, or you're a big group, and you have to submit claims. The payers have a big problem. They have to have what's called authorizations. So before you want to go get and see a doctor, they have to authorize. All that paperwork and all the medical reports, what the payers are doing, they're taking all that data, and their clinicians are looking at big EHR reports and summarizing it and correlating that with the ICD-10 codes, okay? And they approve or deny a claim, working with the largest healthcare outside. The third one is financial services. The other thing these large language models can do is called personalization. Think about an investment advisor, 500 clients. For every client, they have to create a custom report, custom plan. They're using large language model to create personalized journeys and summaries so that now they can do hyper-personalization. So these are the use cases around these 4 or 5 things that people are doing. And that's why this thing is taking us strong. Again, these are large language models. And just another thing, ChatGPT is not the only one. There's something called Claude, Claude.ai. There's Bard. And the reason Claude and Bard are big, because they have a larger context. ChatGPT is limited to small documents. So as a single user, if you want to put a 500-page PDF, you put it on Claude, it can take a big context window. Anyway, I went overboard.
You can see the passion.
Yeah, I do this for day in, day out. So yeah, you have a question?
Question. So, for large language models, for companies that have proprietary data, right? So
yeah,
you got ChatGPT, everybody in the room is in there. But we're talking about companies that got private, even small businesses, right? They got their intellectual property. When you set those up specifically to look at that specific data, and how does that work?
Yeah. So first of all, what we use, you and I, or my wife, or my mother also, that's the commercial aspect of ChatGPT 3.
Right.
In that you have to be, but when people are using for industry, they have what's called a private instance. That's very important first, because what you have to do, make sure that data is not getting used for retraining. So in terms of actually loading these things with your private information, there are 2 ways to do it. I'm going to give an acronym. Please don't get scared. First is called RAGing, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. You load all your data into some kind of database. So when you go searching, it'll look at that first and provide context to the large language model. So it becomes almost like you've trained it to a domain specific. The second way to do this is called fine tuning, where you take a large language model and you tune it with your own data. And the government case I talked to you about, they're using the first one, which is retrieval augmented generation. They load up the FEMA policies into a database, and when they search, instead of hitting OpenAI, private OpenAI, they hit that, get the context, and then generate the text. That's how you fine-tune domains.
Okay, and then the answer should be better technically.
Yeah, because you have to provide context
Right.
to the LLM. So the LLMs have two problems. They have no memory. Okay, if you lose the session, it's gone. And second, they do not have context. You have to give it a lot of context. And the way you give it context with your proprietary is through this retrieval augmented generation that we're doing.
We're gonna come back to this topic of data privacy
Yeah,
and
yes.
encapsulation. So if we just keep thinking a little bit more about use cases and get a couple more examples in, we think about functional or departments in a company. Some departments are, again, embracing it and running with it. Others haven't or not sure where to start. So, Ed, based on, again, the consulting that you're working with, what are you seeing inside companies? Which functional areas are, again, gravitating and moving more quickly to?
And actually comes back to Clayton's question. You know, one of the things that see apart is that we have a very large investment in AI, data science, machine learning, and we've actually trying to help our clients address the need of how do I use generative AI, and I want to put my public information out there. So we do have a product that we brought to market, which is based on ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 and a couple other large language models. That's called CGPT, and that's essentially is running on our private cloud. Actually in Europe to be GDPR compliant as well. And we have a number of clients that are leveraging that model. Some of the areas that we see most of the applications early on, there's a lot of interest in legal and compliance, contract management, kind of there. We actually are working with a cosmetic company around, they do a lot of R&D work. So they have a tremendous amount of research papers. They're trying to, and coming back to Arup's comment about summarization, you know, it takes people weeks and months to research these, come up with summaries. Using CGPT, they're able to go through and process that information, looking for nuggets of information to help them develop their next product or move forward. We're seeing, you know, I see a tremendous amount of interest in this in certainly in marketing. We've got a lot of people doing marketing materials, both on image generation, marketing campaigns, personalization. Those are probably the earlier adopters that are out there. As you look at GPT, ChatGPT and generative AI, one of the things I find is interesting is not an area we're working in, but it's when people also, well, what are the use cases out there? The one that I thought was probably best aligned to a business strategy is around Wendy's. And this is something I picked up from the Wall Street Journal. Wendy's does 80% of their business through drive. And so they use basically natural language processing, which is you know Siri or Alexa. Hey, I need a cheeseburger, large fries, and that they basically use generative AI to take that natural language processing, translate that into text, and then train the large language model based on their menu, right? So they'll come back, oh, you want a bacon cheeseburger? Do you want medium fries? Can I sell you? And they upsell on desserts and other, supersize your fries, whatever the case may be. So they developed this, basically their natural language processing, take an order in, and they got to contend with a lot of challenges there from an AI perspective. But, there's music playing in the background, kids are crying, there's traffic going by, they've got to get the order right. And so they process that in, generate the text AI, process the order, pops up on the screen back in the kitchen, and fill the order and go through. So they piloted this and they've just seen, and so the business strategy of this, the component of this is, one, it's really difficult to find the entry-level order processors on there. So you can replace that and you can increase your order accuracy, you can increase your throughput while reducing costs. So when you talk about a company where 80% of the business comes to the drive-through, if you can increase that drive-through efficiency 10%, you just generate a tremendous amount more money. So there's been a lot of interest, and actually Hardee's and others restaurants have also followed that. So there's just one minor example of where business and generative AI really starts to change the way the world is operating. I think it's interesting. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. it really is everywhere, right? If you think about anything, and we could probably start to apply this. But many of our attendees tonight are solopreneurs or solo practitioners. And the question is, so how in being that, individual contributor, or how does that, where does it make sense? And how would we as individuals leverage this? Any thoughts on that, Fred?
Sure. The great thing about the technology, of course, and I've heard from usually trying to know far more about the technology than I do, is that especially at this point, technology is very accessible to small companies, the solopreneurs, and you hear about ChatGPT. Certainly is the best known of the one example that you go in and you can make you can ask ChatGPT to give you software to write books, to do all sorts of things as well. Other AI, such you can do artwork, create photographs, what have you. The point is that now should we get into a little bit of the legal issues that come up with some of that, or should we wait until later?
Sure. Sure. Why don't we talk a little bit, going back to the intellectual property and data privacy again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
absolutely, sure.
And it ties it back to the small companies, solopreneur, small entrepreneur, small companies.
Okay.
If you're a large company and you're using the technology, and something's discussed already, especially when you talk about individual instantiations, individual instances, private instances of AI, what that really means is that if you're a big enough company, you get your own version, you get your own copy, and you are able to have a contract with the company that says, this is how the data is being used, this is where the data is going, this is where the data is not going, and will not be reused. You have to be careful, though, that with most of the public AIs, which are the ones that are mostly being used by the small companies, some of them don't make that promise.
Yeah.
So if you take your database and the database has valuable information, you're trying to get some insights from it. If you put that into ChatGPT, suddenly that information is now going to be available not just to you, but to everybody else who uses ChatGPT after you. There have been some lawsuits already filed where a number of artists and a number of writers have sued AI owners because the models that they were taught allegedly included works that were not used with permission. That includes text, that includes artwork. So you have some issues there as to whether, especially if you're a small company, whether the output you're getting is actually owned by somebody else whose information, whose data was fed into the learning model, into the AI. So that's an issue. Now it's true that Google, Microsoft, and a few others have already made it clear that if you get sued because you're using their AI, and the allegation is that something came out of the AI that infringed somebody else's rights, they will indemnify you. That's good. It's not great, but you're still stuck in a lawsuit, which you don't want to be in. Trust me. And if you don't understand that, I'll be happy to explain that. We have other issues to look at as well, which is especially for a small company. And some of this is not intuitive. If you try to build a company, you want to own all the intellectual property. If you're building, especially, say, a software company, and you have an AI build some software for you, you want to own that IP. You want to own that, whatever that code is that's developed by the AI. The problem is that recently, both the patent side of the Patent and Trademark Office and the Copyright Office have both said, in their own way, that they will not protect, and they do not see that under law it is a protectable thing. Anything that AI spits out to you is going to be in the public domain. You cannot get a patent on it, cannot get a copyright on it, to the extent it was developed by the AI. So if you're writing software, you go to a ChatGPT. Now, you read the terms of service. The terms of service, people who own ChatGPT is OpenAI. They're very nice in the document that say you own all your inputs, you own all the outputs that come out to you. But what they don't tell you is that if you try to protect it with a copyright registration, the Copyright Office is going to say anything that came out of the AI is public domain. Certainly you can use it, but it's public domain. Anybody can use that. And that's something you should be aware of. Same thing is true on the patent side, in a couple of cases where people have built AI projects, and then those projects allegedly, I'll say allegedly, came up with a new patentable process. At least that's the argument, and the inventor or the human inventor filed a patent application. This was a case, the gentleman is named Stephen Thaler. So Mr. Thaler apparently wrote his own AI from scratch. I don't know exactly how he trained it, but that would be interesting to learn. And then that AI created a new process, and Mr. Thaler, who also happens to be an attorney, filed a patent application for the new process that the AI output. Patent office said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to grant the patent. They went into the lawsuit. Lawsuit so far, Mr. Thaler has lost, and the Supreme Court has refused to review it. So right now, there's some issues there in terms of if you're building something, you should understand that currently the patent on the patent side and on the copyright side, they're not going to own any rights to that output. It's modified, you can add some additional human interaction with it, but they're not going to be able to protect it. This is still a discussion, and I can go into the details of that later, but not now. It's certainly interesting to me, but.
Fascinating. Okay,
It's not
question?
an easy answer, but I was wondering, could a human then come and modify that and then get a patent, or do they have to do something inventive so they keep growing out the AI work? Or-
The short answer is, on the patent side, you start to show human invention with an inventive next step. Is this some of the language? You have to prove, in patent law, you have to prove that's new, useful, not obvious to one skilled in that art or science. And if you're building on somebody else's technology, you have to show some inventive next step, something more than an obvious next step in the technology. And they are saying that whatever you're trying to protect as the invention, that must be human generated and not AI generated. And copyright offers essentially the same thing as to copyrightable works such as text, music, artwork, and so on.
Right, just a quick question on, you can use technology for a typewriter, a word processor, a calculator. There's certain technology that even though you're using it, it would be protected by patent and copyright.
Yes.
There's apparently other technology that it's not. Is the gap just that the legislation has not been done to keep up with the advancement of the technology? Is that where the hole is?
I don't think that's where the hole is, because I don't think that the statute does not address this issue in terms of the use of technology directly. It deals with the question of on the patent side, is it new, useful, not obvious? The copyright side, is it original and non-trivial? And they don't talk really about that issue, which is essentially if you have a human created tool, at what point does the creation of that tool, is that protectable or not protectable? And the counter argument right now is that yes, AI is a tool, it's a human created tool wielded by a human, and therefore should be protected regardless, because if Mr. Thaler, as Mr. Thaler has argued, yes, a human created the AI. The AI responded to certain inputs from him as the human, and the output is therefore essentially goes back to him, although the output actually is AI generated. So his argument is that it's a human input using a human created tool. And perhaps that's also why the Supreme Court isn't ready to talk about it.
Yeah, it's so complicated.
It's a little complicated.
Okay.
I thought it was another question.
Just to be clear, you're saying regardless of whether it's a private AI, whether it's a public AI, that's still.
Good question. Yes, right now, both the patent side of the patent trademark office and the copyright side, they make no distinction as to whether it's a private AI or a public AI.
Do you have to disclose it?
They want you to disclose it, and in case one of the copyright cases involving some artwork by Christina Kashnikova, I believe is her name, is their name. It was not disclosed initially, but it was discussed in social media, and that got back to the copyright office, which then said Khambekar, would you please come and explain this to us? And they ended up withdrawing the original copyright registration for the AI generated part. Khambekar did get a copyright registration for the human created part of what essentially was a graphic novel. So the copyright protects the text, the registration protects the text, not the AI generated part.
So it's complicated in this role. So we're gonna keep with you for another minute, okay?
Yes.
Another complicated area is really about the ethics behind this and the biases that can be embedded in this or learned even from this. So, you know, what challenges have you seen or, you know, situations you've been engaged to help solve regarding ethical challenges with generative AI?
As you might expect, the learning model, and this goes back to the earlier comments, the learning model is critical. If you don't have, you have a learning model that reflects one set of people and one set of thinking, it's not going to give you another set of people, another set of thinking. And some of the hallucinations, not surprisingly, reflect some of the worst thoughts and approaches that humans come up with. So there have been some cases, I've not been personally involved in, and there's been a number of cases where somebody had used a public AI, especially the public AI used a very large model, but unfortunately the model was not as inclusive as it probably should have been. And some of the output that came out from the AI could have led to some lawsuits. You have to be very careful when doing that. You have to make sure that you do have full review.
Yeah, if I may add, there are now a number of companies that will test your AI and determine whether there are any biases. So whether there are gender biases or demographic biases, and all of those. There are specialist companies out there now which will do that for them. But of course, I mean, the scale also has to be fairly large, I would say, the volume also has to be fairly large.
So again, we get into governance, right? Everybody's anxious to use this, and given, you know, we've got large clients and it's hard to control who's doing what, who's using it, who's not, even students, which students are allowed to use it, how they're allowed to use it, and how do we control when they're using it. So at this concept of governance, right? You know, what do you suggest? You know, how do we try to manage just that? What tools they're using, what data they're engaging and using it on? How do we control the masses?
Yeah, and I think most companies are dealing with this very much similar to other adopting technologies early on. So it deals with, you know, establishing the right steering team, governance committee to oversee that multifunctional, cross-discipline team to understand what we're trying to do, defining goals and objectives for how to use generative AI or other AI technologies within that company. What are the business cases they're trying to do? Understanding and forming teams to actually experiment that. So getting use cases out there, getting studies out there to do that. Having a governance process does intake prioritization, looks for results and what performance you're getting out of those AI models that we're truly trying to accomplish. Finally, you know, the last piece of this is it's experimentation. It's an iterative process. The tool sets, you know, we're at the very bottom of the hill here, right? There's billions and billions of dollars in the last 12 months that have just been pumped into investing in AI models and technologies. There is no clear winner out there. It's going to change over time. So as a company, where you're trying to stave off competition, differentiate yourself, add value, reduce costs, introduce new products. AI can help with all those things. You've got to set priorities. You can't do it all. You can't invest everywhere. You can't be everywhere. So you've got to have the right governance process in place. And that takes a lot of different perspectives. It's not just IT, it's not just sales, it's not just finance. You've got to get a lot of different ideas as to how this can help you manage and succeed in what is going to be a very rapidly changing world. That helps.
And when we,
One question.
oh, sure.
Yeah, I read an article today, and it started out with a story by Plato, and I'm I've been studying philosophy, so I may get this wrong, but it went something like there was men in a cave and it was a dark cave and there were shadows. The men were afraid of those shadows, but one of the men escaped and there was sunlight and there was no more shadows. And when he went back into the cave to tell the other men that the shadows are not real, they did not believe him. So the idea of perception is reality, or reality is perception. And then, you know, these large language models, do we have to be concerned? And I think we can all, in today's world, you know, just, you know, political discussions, we can all point to time when somebody's perception is the reality. And Plato also concluded that you can't convince somebody who's that's their reality that they're wrong. And so, how does it play into training these large language models? Because obviously, if you skew it one perception or another, it can kind of skew the outcome as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just it's a huge challenge out there it's a huge investment in time, energy, and resources to train these large language models. Where you see success is where you narrow the focus what the large language model is focused on. So I think you were talking about machine learning or deep learning, but the difference between machine learning and deep learning is machine learning is basically focused on a pretty narrow application here. And so deep learning is layers and layers of machine learning across that to build up a composite solution there. So the challenge with these large language models is if you're building a chat GPT, it takes a tremendous amount of resources to do this. If you're trying to build a process that says, let me understand from my contracts with all my vendors what I'm doing to manage data privacy, that's a much easier model to train and control. And so as a corporation, from a governance perspective, it comes back to what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's it going to cost me to solve that problem? And, you know, as one of my clients uses the line all the time, is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know, right? We're not there yet. We're still in the experimentation phase of this. But eventually you're going to get down to how much am I spending on these initiatives? Is it really worth the outcomes? And I guarantee you, there are programs and projects out there that are well worth the outcomes. The Wendy's example that I use is one where I think it is a true bottom line game changer for that industry. But the one thing I don't know is I don't know what they've spent on that and was it worth it at this point in time, but it does show that promise. So I don't know if that helps, but there are delusions out there, but you know, as a business, as a governance process, you've got to help your organization focus on what's in front of what you're trying to accomplish, and where AI can help you change your company.
Take it just a little bit further. Basically, you know, you start off with a small domain, then there are like just a few corner cases that you got to be careful of. And as you kind of grow and it all gets, you know, into some random areas or very wide areas, and there are lots of, you know, odd cases, odd situations, and therefore, you know, then it's bad data giving you bad input data giving you bad output data. So, you know, you got to like start off small. There's LLMs, like especially ChatGPT, have kind of like, you know, spent time over multiple years to come up with something, and they still have problems. Like, you know, some of the observations that are well known, but you got to start small to be careful.
And one to throw in your comments, but you just touched on something. You know, the data, as you talk about large language models and how you train that data in there. As a corporation moving towards AI, understanding your data quality, your gaps is really critical, because AI is really based on good quality, vast amounts of data. So as a company trying to prepare yourself, you really need to kind of understand your customers, understand your products, understand your markets, and the better shape you can get that data in, is the better results you'll be able to get eventually from generative AI or other technologies there.
All right. One topic we haven't talked about is really the people and the people that are going to lead us in this effort, or build these use cases and pilot them and test the data and validate the results, et cetera. So any thoughts on, again, how companies who are already lean, people are stretched, we all are overworked, how are we getting the resources available? How are we training the resources that we're putting into this space to dedicate, or tell them this is another one of their side day jobs? Any thoughts on training up and then ultimately retaining resources? to lead us down this path. Any thoughts, anybody?
Sure,
All
sure.
right.
One thing I just want to do say, I think we touched it. Anybody know what ChatGPT was trained on? Question from the audience.
Oh, the internet,
Yeah.
the internet, which is scary, scary, scary.
It was trained on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. So we all know that Wikipedia is open source, right? So they took Wikipedia, they took Common Crawl books and GitHub and trained this model.
Yeah.
So the reason I want to come back to this is large language model with OpenAI are called general knowledge models. There's going to have a lot of problems with that. Coming back to your question, I just want to make sure that has a tie-in that these things are trained on. And there's a huge thing going on in New York Times because OpenAI bots were scraping New York Times. I think you must know about this. They stopped it. So what's going to happen in 3 years? There's no data. There's no OpenAI because data is going to be guarded. You cannot take it. What they have done is taken everything that we have generated that's publicly free and trained a model. Corporations are not going to go there. Nobody's going to give, Morgan Stanley is not going to say, hey, OpenAI, take my model and just do it. So there's going to be a lot of risks in large language models because they won't have data to train. And once New York Times stops and all these content generators stop giving these large language models, so beware that you're going to work with stale general knowledge. The second thing is in terms of skills, one of the biggest skills that we work with knowledge workers is something called prompt engineering. Prompting is very, very important because the way these models work is prompt. And there are books on it on Amazon, you can read it. Very important with these models can take personas. You can go to ChatGPT and say, today you're a writer, today you're a marketeer. So you have to give it a persona. That's very, very important in prompts. So one skill that we are teaching everybody is people who are non-tech background is this whole thing is how do you interact with this model? How do you provide context to this model? How do you give personas to this model? And there are books out there, and that's called prompt engineering or prompt template, which is a very big part of it. The second part of it is really working with hallucinations, which is when things come back and counterfactual stuff comes out, because it's trained on Wikipedia, and it jumbles everything to deep learning and gives you garbage out sometimes, is how do you look for ground truth? Big, big problem. So I have a case right now where doctors are using summaries on EHRs that are 50 pages long. A summary comes out and they're like, yeah, good. Now the good, they approve, but nobody read that 50 pages. So that's the second thing is, how do you actually do this human in the loop interface to ground check summarization with the ground truth? And the other one is a prompt. So you're actually creating personas and prompting these things. And there are books on this, like there are 50 to 100 page long. So those are the two areas of digital upskilling that is very, very important that we have seen. I'm not talking the tech side, I'm just talking the end user side and stuff like that.
Can I say, the personas, so are you saying if there were 3 different personas and they asked the same exact question, they could get 3 different answers?
Exactly, because these large language models are next word predictors. They have no clue about sentences. All they do is predict. So if you're a techie in the room, you can actually go and change those settings, and the setting is called temperature. So if you make the temperature warmer or colder, it will start generating craziness, or it will be a lot more consistent. So you can ask the same question 3 times, it may generate 2 different things on the same persona. So going across persona is all different things. So the persona thing is very important because it allows the model to give context in the next word prediction that you're a writer, you're a marketeer, you're a doctor. You start off your prompt with that. And there's a limit to how much you can put in the prompt, and that's called the context window. So you cannot just put 500 pages of prompt and it'll say, I can't take it anymore. But the persona is very important.
So if my persona is the same, and I ask the question 3 times on the same day, I should get the same answer.
It may not, because these are next word predictors. As
Because
long
over
as you,
time, I would expect that even with the same persona, it could change,
Yes.
exactly.
but the same day, it could be different.
It
too.
could be different. And if you, sorry, you want to say something?
No, all I'm saying is that basically like what you talked about the temperature.
Mhm.
It's like the way to understand it is whether it is more creative and possibly, it can be fantasy. So creativity is good, if you're like generating some marketing material or, like, hey, what's a good idea to have a party, and things like that, very creative kind of ideas. On the other hand, if you want, like he was talking about, like the summarization of an EHR, then you don't want to get creative, you want to get factual. So that is where the temperature setting is.
Well, I can imagine,
Or the
like,
same
in
person.
your example of the prior authorizations.
Yeah.
If a payer's ingesting EHRs.
Yep.
And making an assessment and determining yes or no, if you get a service based on that. It's still up to the provider and the patient to be aware that they have to fight for their rights if they were denied, basically.
100%. And like I said, one thing I would do recommend people who are non-techie is to learn prompt engineering. And the word engineering is wrong, just to understand how to interact with this model. The human machine interface is extremely important. And the second thing is really look at how to figure out counterfactual explanation when the model puts out. So we do a lot of this training in my company, right? And that's what we do with knowledge workers all day. How do you prompt it? How do you work with it? How do you extract things out of it? And these prompts could be, people that build prompt templates that started making money on it. You can go to a marketplace and buy prompting. So if you're a lawyer in the room, you can buy template for law. Marketing, you can buy templates for marketing. So anybody in different industries, if you want to look at one IP, you should make those IP your templates, your IP. I don't know if this is, that can be,
Depends on the job.
let's talk. Yeah.
Excellent.
No, I'm just gonna say, just to your point, I'm a marketer, right? So I do a lot of different prompts for target audiences. And maybe the similar big picture, but I might set, prompt like, I'm a marketer targeting enrollment executives at universities, and I want to promote them on the value of white papers to target students. Or I could just take the same thing and just change the words around, but like the insurance business, so we change the white paper to target people who need insurance, right? So even though a lot of the prompting could be the same, but it's all based on target audience. And,
the personas, but you can actually take those templates and there are actually a marketplace out there, you can sell those. I mean, if you want, you can buy and sell prompts. Believe it or not, like a lot of the companies I work with, like in Morgan Stanley and UBS and all that, those prompt templates are their IP sometimes. So, like they keep it very guarded. Because with financial advisor, these prompts are not 2 lines, they're like 30, 40, 60 line templates.
I'm a practical.
What was that?
My son, he wanted to look for different jobs, he was applying online, and he decided that he could use ChatGPT to give cover letters directed to the particular job description. They would make a recommendation and generate like 90% of the text. He would tweak it and submit individual cover letters.
Makes sense, yeah.
And when he told me that, I said, wow, I never thought to do it.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what's happening.
Exactly.
And not these kids are.
And there's a couple of books on
It's just an
Amazon.
example of day to day where
Absolutely.
it's happening, right?
Now, if you want to learn it, there's some very good on Amazon. Come see me. There are like 3-4 books people have written that you can actually learn how to prompt.
Well, that's one of our leading into our next question, and maybe we'll get to the books on prompting, which is pretty specific, but again, how do we stay current? It's changing so fast. So I'd like to ask, because you all have a diverse perspective on this potentially, but again, knowing, I don't know if anybody here is your area of expertise, or you want it to be your area of expertise, but how do we stay current? What's the most important resource to be looking at or reading regularly? Is there a social media, somebody we should follow? Are there some books? But even if you read a book, I feel like this is better read fast because there's the next one. So tell me your thoughts on how to stay current in this amazingly, rapidly transforming world of generative AI.
That's ChatGPT.
So I got that. Already.
I'll do it from a less technical perspective, because I think a lot of people in the room aren't technical. I do think educating yourself on the business cases, the applications, the investments, the tools that are being released. I mean, it's drinking from a fire hose. There's a ton of information out there. I tend to pay more attention to Forbes and Wall Street Journal and McKinsey types of reports than there are a number of blogs out there that are great as well, but at least in terms of business applications of some of that, I think within an organization, so that's you as an individual, as an executive trying to figure out how do I just try and swim in the stream of constant information that's coming? I do think as a leader in an organization, it's helpful to get people together to talk about this. So it could be lunch and learns, it could be study groups, it could be, hey, let's get together and have coffee once a week and just talk about this and change up who's responsible for bringing interesting information to the table. So that's, that's how I try to make it more ubiquitous as to how people are doing this. It is everywhere, and everyone needs to understand what this is. Everyone that's going into a job today, that job is going to change in the next 5 years, very likely. So companies need to figure out how to reskill their workforce. Employees need to figure out what skills they bring to the table and how that's going to change going forward to make sure they stay relevant and important. That's kind of my message. I don't have any silver bullets for it. It's a lot of hard work, but I think there's probably some other perspective you guys.
The way I do it is I look at 2 or 3 venture capital. One of them I'll give you A16Z. A16Z. That stands for Anderson Horowitz. He's the one who invented the internet.
Yeah.
A16Z, if you go to the website, they have beautiful videos. They dumb everything down. And there's amazing blogs. They dumb it down. And it's good to stay relevant where the future is going. So I would pick up 1 or 2 of these venture capital. And there's also YouTube videos that they have, where there's a speaker out there and they just dumb it down, what's coming and stuff like that. So yeah, I would go with A16Z and some venture capital. That's what I do. Obviously, I have the tech side of hundreds of people. The other one is there's Time 100 list that was just released of the 100 AI people that have impact on AI. I was fortunate enough to meet Senator Lou last week. I was in Washington, D.C. with him. Look at this list, and there are some people who are actually on the Time 100. You may want to follow them on LinkedIn, and there are some of them are non-technical people. So that's another area you should look at. The list got published a month ago. It's called the Time 100 list of AI innovators.
I would say social media is probably too rife with examples and everybody claiming exaggerated things. So stay away from social media, go to a few leaders, either local or like you mentioned, well-known leaders in the space and follow them, or we are probably a good group, so you can come to us for advice.
Thank you. Some great thoughts there as well. And then another question I just wanted to touch on is, again, there's so many platforms. There's so many tools to choose from. Again, whether no matter what your company and they specialties and even our classic software technology vendors who are servicing most of your organizations, they're embedding now AI into theirs. So they tell you don't need to go out and buy another thing. We're going to have it just in there. So I find it also exhausting and overwhelming. So if I were the CIO or leading this initiative or on the board and challenging, how am I going to suggest they start looking at the different technologies? How do they pick? How does the company pick which one they're going to invest in to protect their data to make a difference in their organization? Open forum, fight it out.
I spoke a lot, but go ahead.
No, I would say, Ed mentioned this, you have to start off with what your problem is, there are lots of attractive tools out there, but, first of all, what is your problem? Focus on that, and then try to see as to what other people may have done in terms of tools. So futurepedia.io is a website, and that has 5,000 tools right now, artificial intelligence tools.
What is it?
They indicate.
Could you repeat that?
Futurepedia.io. So, so I'm not saying that, go to that site and then select a tool from there. But what you can do is figure out what problem you have and what you're kind of thinking. So for example, it could be okay, I want to make an attractive proposal to my customer. Okay, you enter that into the search, and it might give you a few possibilities, and then you see that okay, the possibilities that are given, whether they kind of are similar to what you want to do, and then you can then think of the next step, which is okay, maybe it makes sense for me to create my own AI and then go forward with it. So that can be one way of deciding how to go forward, with a small team, but just on your own kind of situation.
The way we look at it is in three folds. You want to build tools, you want to give tools to the end user, or you want to build applications. The bigger companies are building applications. And those applications are built on Amazon, Google, and Azure, and you need a team of developers. But let's look at the left-hand side, which is the tooling side, just for small businesses. One way to is get an enterprise license, and it's $20 a month, whatever it is, and you can opt in, opt out. The other thing is with the new Microsoft releases of Office, they're going to embed this concept of Copilot, right? The whole idea about this Copilot will be embedded. So that's coming from Microsoft, where there's going to be LLM inside Word, inside Excel, where you can throw data at Excel and say, give me all the graphs and charts. So that Copilot concept, Satya talked about a month and a half ago, it's going to be embedded in new versions of Office, and it's going to power. So you got to think about these. Obviously, the business case is important, but if you go to the tooling, do you want to be on the tooling side or you want to be on the application side? That's the divide. The big companies are building applications.
Yep.
Smaller companies are just tooling. So this is very important to make that distinction. And in terms of the cost, I can tell you on the right-hand side, those costs can run from $100,000 to a couple of $1 million, depending on the applications you build. But then on the tooling, you have to be careful. It's $20 a month, $30 a month, they add up. And there are hundreds of tools, like you said, right? You have one tool for image generation, one tool for this generation. So you got to just be careful per person. If you're going to spend $100 a month, that's $1,200. What kind of productivity gains you're going to go? So you got to have a measurable ROI. I think you mentioned that. Because everybody talks about soft ROI, hard ROI, and nothing comes out of it. See, again, tooling, application. Where do you want to be? And I think a lot of the people here, I don't know, smaller companies, maybe bigger companies, are more on the tooling side. But I just want to make sure each dollar adds up. Yeah.
So my only add to that is, starting with my business case and objective, what you're trying to accomplish, I would actually plug hiring a consulting company like CA Partners. But one of the things we do, right, is we bring in from a consulting perspective, we bring expertise into clients to help them up that learning curve as well and take risk out of the tooling decisions. Ourselves, we've invested in Amazon Web Services. We've invested with ChatGPT, OpenAI to be able to build those tools. We're learning, we're innovating, but we're betting on proven vendors, proven technologies, and less startups. I mean, the tool marketplace is, as 5,000 will be, 2 weeks from now it'll be 10,000, right? And so how do you pick a winner? You can't. And I think you're right in terms of smaller companies need to pick tools that can work and solve a specific business problem, but you've got to pay attention to data security, privacy, as well. Those are some pretty big concerns there. So,
and from the legal, it picks up the legal side. The legal side, you're looking at a number of issues, including, of course, compliance. Your companies of any size, or if you're working with a company of any size, you're already in compliance to some extent or another because data privacy applies to pretty much everybody these days. So you have to extend that to understand how use of this tool is going to affect your compliance with data privacy. If you're building tools, you have to understand how any use of AI will affect your ownership of what is being built and how you interact with others. And certainly if you bring the technology into your company for use by your company, you have to understand what they're saying in terms of their contracts, in terms of what the technology actually does, as to what they're providing to you and who's managing any risk that might come out of the use of a third-party tool, whether it's a private instantiation of the existing AI, or if you're building your own AI with the help of somebody else. So that all has to be looked at. This is what you have to look at anyway as a CIO. It expands your list of issues to look at, but that's not a surprise.
Just a quick clarification between when you say tooling, is that like using a SaaS model from another company that's developed a SaaS model that you're using to accomplish something that you need done?
I'll give you just an example and you can jump in. OpenAI has two licensing models. The one that my mother's using, that's free. And then the one that's the enterprise license, by the way, just letting you know, the free version is going away in January. So OpenAI is going to start charging because they have to make money on the $90 billion valuation. So yeah, the tooling piece is going to be SaaS. And you want to always get the enterprise licenses because of all this security as much as you can. Yeah, but it's all delivered by SaaS. It's to a web interface anyway.
Yeah, just want to make sure they.
Yeah, so yeah, unless you're a very big company that are actually taking the models and building on the data center, but that's a whole different ballgame.
We are going to open it up. We have questions at this stage. So there is a gentleman in the back with the maroon sweater. Now they're going to get harder.
Why do the media love to run stories talking about how AI? Yeah.
I have my viewpoint as a professor, but
I welcome your viewpoint. Yeah.
so one of the things we did not talk about is large language models. First of all, even as data scientists, which I am at, we don't know how it produces the output till today because of this deep learning. The thing is, what's really scary about these models, they can be very innovative. There was a study done by Wharton, I can send it to you guys about 2 months ago, where it was creating new products. So what people are worried about is the singularity principle. If you train bigger and bigger and bigger models, the knowledge that they have and then what they can generate, is it going to be close to AGI? And what's coming next is more scary. There's a book called The Sixth Wave or The Coming Wave by the founders of DeepMind. These LLMs will have agents. They can start acting.
Yep.
And now think about this world where you have an LLM and your personal assistant, it knows about you. And there's a company called pi.com. You can check it out. It starts talking to you and gets to understand you. And you say, I want to book my tickets. I want to do this. I want to do that. So there's going to be a world where you will have avatars in LLMs with agents talking to other agents, nearing AGI. And that's what people are very worried about. And this is where the dichotomy changes, because once the LLMs can think, act, feel, do things, they're just acting on their own.
They can spend your money.
I don't know about that.
That's
But this is what they
I mean, it's sort of buying a ticket, like if I was talking to
it's there. Check it out.
an American Airlines agent, if it picks up and starts buying.
But American Airlines
tickets.
will have an LLM on the other side.
Right.
Your LLM will talk to that LLM and they'll talk to each other. But go ahead, please.
The other comment I would have, so you're absolutely dead on point, and that's part of the scary part. The other part is, I mean, it will be ubiquitous everywhere. So AI is in military applications already, and it will continue to go. And so when you take a look at what's going on overseas in Israel and Gaza or Ukraine, and now all of a sudden you've got machines are figuring out, using computer vision and other techniques, that's where you get the existential threat. It doesn't really matter what we do on our side, because other countries will drive that. So that's part of the scary part of it. I don't think so.
Yeah, and the book is very good. It's called The Coming Wave. As by Soleimani. He's the founder of DeepMind.
Right.
Anybody watch the Netflix documentary AlphaGo? If not, just watch it. Where yeah, so he's the founder of DeepMind that formed this new company called Reflection AI that's got a personal chatbot that learns you over time. And it becomes you. Called pi.com.
There's even chatbot models out there now. It's very easily, you can train it on your own data. And
But these guys actually, you will see, go to pi.com and it's very different. It starts to talk to you.
Is there a good source, single source of where all the privacy regulations and rules are summarized?
The source that I like right now the most is a group called International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP.org. They're one of the, they're not the only ones, there's a whole bunch of other organizations as well, but they're one of the better known. The upside is there's a huge amount of very good information. Again, it's IAPP.org for International Association of Privacy Professionals. The only downside is to try to sell you a certification. And that might be very good for you, or it may not be, but they'll try to, they actually have several very good certifications. But they are, in fact, I think right now, or sometime this week, they're having a conference all day long about AI and privacy. But I find that the materials tend to be very, very good.
Okay. I kind of dovetailed his question in what you said, but you said something about, Copilot is going to be coming online for shortly, and that's just built right into Office. I'm sure there's going to be lots of other things like that, where it's just part of the day-to-day tooling of use. is there a concern that if a company is using the normal tools that are now augmented by AI, if they start to lose either intellectual property rights, copyright issues, or different things, like at what point does a company have to be concerned about building a firewall around their own tools and information to ensure that they're not just simply either giving things away or losing the leverage?
That's always a very good question and a very hard question to answer, because especially now that on the patent side and on the copyright side, we're saying we're not going to protect that.
Would that extend to Copilot?
It would probably, well, it would extend to anything that Copilot as an AI outputs.
But if it's being used by the tool, how would you determine whether it's Copilot or not?
That's the multi-million-dollar question right there. I don't know, because I've not seen Copilot yet. Right now, we're dealing with the easy edge cases. I say easy, quote unquote easy. We know that if an AI that looks like an AI, and we've been hearing about ChatGPT, we're hearing about Midjourney, we're hearing about other well-known AIs. They make something and we can put a fence around that. We know that right now we can't protect that by patent or by copyright. Now, what you're referencing is reality of what's already happening now and going forward. The blending of AI with human interaction. What part of that is or is not protectable? I can answer that based on what I'm hearing from the offices currently. My own theory is that they're actually going too far. That my own take on this is that a human using a human tool that creates something that should still be protectable as a product of the human mind, which is what intellectual property is all about. Other people share that, other people don't share that. I don't have an answer for you yet, but stay tuned. The Copyright Office actually, as an example, has asked, they put up forward a request for a response on exactly this issue. That's due, initial responses are due, I believe, the end of this month, October 30th, 31st. And it's a very detailed and very good set of questions. So they're thinking about it. Again, I'm not trying to show the patent side or the Copyright Office as being Luddites. By no means, they're not by any means. Rather, they're trying to address these issues, and they have limited inputs themselves and trying to get answers that can make sense for everybody. The question is right on one place. So, long-winded way of saying, great question.
Is there, you talk about the certification that IAPP can provide. Is that something the company should be say, at least we have said at this point in time, via this certification, we can say that this is what's ours and this is what is not.
I don't think that they're connected that way. I mean, certification is like any other certification or any other credential. It's certainly helpful for people to have that if that's the field they're working in.
Are you saying with credentials, I can get certified versus my company is certified?
Yes, yes. So an individual can be certified specifically in US privacy law versus EU privacy law versus so on.
Got it. So I think
And they also have, for those who are interested, they have one that's specifically for technology, a certification in privacy technology, and one also privacy management. Point is that there are other organizations as well that are very good. I know the Electronic Frontier Foundation is doing a lot of privacy. Future Privacy Forum, plus a lot of the colleges and universities are doing a great deal because this is obviously a very hot topic. What's also driving this right now is that for the state legislature level, it's a shiny object. So states are passing a bunch of new laws, have passed a bunch of new laws. So it's going to be interesting in the process. How that affects AI remains to be seen, but most of the laws that come out of the legislatures recently have nothing to do with AI. So it's purely a question of how do you protect personal data.
Amp up your cybersecurity.
It's not that FTC already has a lot of things in place to, so really we shouldn't have to wait around for legislation necessarily because a lot of it's covered by the FTC. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So the yes is that FTC is one of the designated organizations at the national level for privacy. And for a number of the privacy laws that are out there that are federal, FTC is the organization you go to. And for something like, there's a law called COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which addresses, if you have kids going to a website and they're under the age of 13, you have to do some additional things to comply with that law. That's FTC, that is the administrative entity. Others, of course, are different groups. If you're talking about HIPAA, which is health privacy, that's going to be CMS, and that's going to be under Department of Health. So
Right.
it's different, and I could get deeper into that, but that I can be better after.
There'll be some special expansions to network and talk more. Other questions, other areas that you're interested in hearing more about? Yes, oh yes, anybody virtual have questions for us?
We do have one question from the chat, wondering if any of you could speak to generative AI within HR and HR processes.
Really know the explanation. Give examples, I have I would say roughly 30 use cases in HR now. So HR, we can say kind of very, very roughly, recruitment, onboarding, development of people, and engagement of people. So in the recruitment space, it's like our friend mentioned, it's like generating a specific cover letter to a specific job. That is one case. The other way is generating a job description from what is needed and who is the job description generator for. So whether it is for young people who are creative, or whether it is for a person like Fred, Yeah, different person. So so you can tailor, one recruiter can tailor a job description to different target market. Then it is basically the kind of parsing of resumes. So resume can get big, and then you just want the gist of it, because most recruiters will look at a resume for a few seconds, right? So to do that, and then to go beyond and say that, okay, the artificial intelligence itself will kind of rank resumes based on your criteria. Saying that, okay, my criteria was so much education and so much experience, and some specific soft skills and so on. So if they are listed, then do it that way. And then further, to do an interview, so a personalized interview with a candidate and try to determine, whether the candidate is fit for it. I would not say trust that mechanism, but whether that is a use case, yes, certainly that is a use case. And then you can come into onboarding, and in onboarding, it's kind of again, that the individual people being onboarded will ask questions and get answers personal to them. So the artificial intelligence basically knows all the policies of the company, or where the, where the documents kept, or, where, who do you go for certain kinds of things, say, a buddy system, or for financial benefits related questions and so on. So, all these questions can be ingested, and those can be answered for the individual, so okay, I have one kid, so the answer for me in terms of benefits is this. Somebody else has 3 kids, the answer could be different from them. Or somebody else who has no kids but has pets, that could be different. So they can get personalized answers to their questions during the onboarding process. And then learning, learning to technical things, as well as procedural things within the company. So that can also be, personalized based on artificial intelligence. Again, the artificial intelligence will ingest all the material that is relevant, and then provide the answers which are relevant at that particular time. And then kind of the same process for, developing people. Are you giving them proper guidance? How should the the guidance be targeted to a particular person? What language should you speak to them? How should you mentor them? Or the other way, which is to like basically, okay, what have they done? And then what has their performance criteria been? And what have they achieved? Because currently what happens is that performance appraisals can take place like once a year, maybe twice a year, and you forget what all the person did for the vast majority of the year. But if you are continuously tracking this and artificial intelligence can track it, then you could possibly identify like the good things that the person did and kind of like have a more, kind of like a uniform assessment of your people. So there are like number of use cases.
It sounds like they're endless use cases.
Yeah.
Question in the back?
Although with training, say you would work in a regulated industry such as life science, there are probably a lot of compliance issues to also be considered within that because you're measuring control of your process. So do you see AI taking a play in there?
Well, it can certainly tell you about the compliance issues, and the compliance training is a significant part of those companies. So then, yeah, part of the compliance training can be done by using the artificial intelligence tool. What it is essentially is, rather than attending a session which will take place only like at certain times, office hours, and all that. Now, whenever you have a question, you can possibly query the AI. And the artificial intelligence will tell you, So if I have a problem at 9 o'clock at night, I will get an answer at that time, or at least a reasonable answer. And again, if the proper references are given, what we talked about temperature, creativity versus like factuality. So then, provided the proper references are given, then the person has some confidence that the AI is not fibbing and these answers are the correct answers. So yeah, certainly that will be useful.
Yeah, because I was thinking a lot of the training programs now are becoming, a little bit more remote where people can have access. But if there's a knowledge behind that where the program is seeing, well, this person's accomplished this skill or understands this concept, we can move on to the next. I could see where there could be efficiencies brought into the training process.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question. Oh, good. Well, two things actually. Just on the lighter side, for anybody who's a layman on this, there's a website I like to use called there's an AI for that.com. You know that? We have about 8,800 AIs, and the search bar is find AI using AI. So it's really good. There's an AI for that. Oh. Well, let me just check with my chat GPT because I did set up a prompt. I need 10 questions to ask a panel on how AI works and how it's helping businesses. That would help me out here, but
I should use that.
I mean, they're all here. I'll read you the 10 questions real quick, and you can answer one of them about that. Some have already been answered though. Ethical considerations, how does AI complement human skills in the workplace? What skill sets are needed for business to effectively implement and utilize AI? What common challenges businesses face in adopting AI? How do you see AI evolving? I think we covered that too. Things like that. It's just amazing you can come up with anything.
So you didn't even beat AI.
Comment on one, you raised, how did AI complement, human skills? One of the studies that I saw was, University of Washington, followed, 5,000 agents on the contact center using an AI assistant. And they try to measure the productivity. It's really about a productivity study around, if I've got an AI assistant that getting the right answer out, it increased productivity across the board by about 15%. So that was measured by how quickly questions were answered and requests were closed. So that was pretty impressive. 15% across 4,000 real numbers. The more impressive part of that was as they measured, it had less impact on their top performers. There was a 35% increase in performance of their medium to lower performers. So basically what it, it didn't raise the whole bar that much, but it took all of the low performers up and raised that up to a much higher level. So it becomes a tool to augment human productivity and quality of output of that service. So those are real numbers and that's pretty early on in the AI game.
Well, that's a great way to end. So we're not all going to be replaced. Thank you so much.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.